Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of Divine Femininity United. I am your girl, Dr. Bianca Miss B. Lee, and we are here for another segment of our reading through this amazing book. Man, listen, this book got us getting busy, getting down to the nitty gritty that is in our subconscious selves, our hearts, those deep, dark, dank, cold corners of our inner workings and our beings that's really hindering us becoming a wedge in our freeing and liberating ourselves, all of these things. It's so good, you all. And that book is Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender, written by the late great Dr. David R. Hawkins. This book, you all, is phenomenal. And we're just at chapter 5 right now. And that chapter is entitled Grief. Yep, it's grief. And man, oh man, I will say for myself, within the last 4 weeks, I've had to say goodbye to three people. Three people. Okay, young people, just in their 40s. Spur of the moment, we don't know why. Autopsy reads that everything was perfectly fine. Even last year, a good god brother of mine passed away in his sleep. Passed away in his sleep on the morning of his 13th year anniversary. He had just created a TikTok video celebrating, commemorating their anniversary, just chronological order of them dating, him proposing, marriage, and then the 5 children that they shared over the course of 13 years, only to never wake up to celebrate it. He posted it and she was able to see it and all of those things. And man, when I tell you, okay, the man that partially raised me, my uncle Derek, he passed in 2022, shattered me. My goodness, all of those things. We've had cousins and everybody who passed. My son was born and passed 5 minutes later in 2011. Grief, to say the least, has had me in a chokehold over the years, right? Now, here as of late, because I've gained a great deal of consciousness leveling up, so I understand that grief. I don't see grief as everyone else sees grief. I don't see death as everyone else may see death. I see it differently in my new inner standing and over understanding, but some may not have that capacity as of yet, right? And grief holds them. Grief, embodies them, and they don't know how to let it go. So, in this chapter reading, hopefully, prayerfully, this will be a freeing chapter for you in your journey through grief, and things like that. And I'm not sure what it says. I'm not sure what he's going to say, but I do know the author. And I know that this is going to be transformative. Okay. So, with that being said, you all know on Tuesday evenings, I don't like to keep you long because it is on the East Coast, it is 8 o'clock, right? So, we don't want to keep you long. So, we're going to jump right into it. At any point, from where you're listening to, we're airing live on Clubhouse, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, all of the things, okay? And so, wherever you're listening from, thank you for your presence. If there's something that I'm reading, something that you hear that resonates with you, use the chat, use the comment section, say how you feel, because I'm going to read it aloud, give voice to your words, and we can dive in, right? We can dive in. All right. Until then, I'm just going to read, and if I have something to add to it, I will at that point. Okay. All right. Here we go. This is chapter 5, entitled Grief. Grief is an experience common to us all. In grief, we feel that things are too difficult. We'll never make it. We are unloving and unlovable. We have thoughts such as, all the years I've wasted. It is a feeling of sadness and loss, loneliness, the feeling of if only, regret, feelings of abandonment, pain, helplessness, and hopelessness, nostalgia, melancholy, depression, longing, irretrievable loss, heartbrokenness, anguish, disappointment, pessimism. Grief can be precipitated by the loss of a belief system, a relationship, a capacity or role, a hope about ourselves, or an overall attitude toward our life, external circumstances, or institutions. It's the feeling. I'll never get over this. This one is too difficult. I tried, but nothing helps. There's a feeling of vulnerability to pain and suffering. And so we see a great deal of it in the external world to reinforce and justify our own inner feeling. There's a crying for someone to help because we can't do anything about it. And we feel that maybe someone else can do it for us. This is in contradistinction. There it is, contradistinction to apathy. Apathy is what we went over last chapter, apathy and depression. So this is a contradistinction to apathy, where there is a feeling that no one can help. Next section, allowing the grief. Allowing the grief. Most of us carry a great deal of suppressed grief. Men, especially, are prone to hide that particular feeling, as it is considered unmanly and unmasculine to cry. Most people are afraid of the amount of grief they have suppressed. They are terrified that they will be swamped and overwhelmed by it. People will say, if I were to ever start crying, I would never stop. There is so much grief in the world, grief in my life, grief in my family and friends. Oh, the untold tragedies of life, all of the disappointments and smashed hopes. Suppressed grief is responsible for many psychosomatic conditions and health related complaints. Instead of suppressing the feeling, if it is allowed to come up and be relinquished, we can quickly jump from grief to acceptance. The continuing grief over a loss is due to the resistance to accepting that state and allowing the grief to expend itself. The persistence of a feeling is due to the resistance of allowing it to be relinquished. Example, cry me a river. Once we accept the fact that we can handle grief, we are already up into pride. So he's discussing what he's talking about is the levels of consciousness that we went over in the previous book, Power versus Force. If you don't have that book, let me know. I'll send it over to you, okay? The feeling of I can do it and I can handle it brings us to courage. With the courage to face our inner feelings and let them go, we thus move on to the levels of acceptance and eventually peace. When we let go of a lot of grief, we have been holding over the years. Our friends and family will notice a change in our facial expression. Our step will be lighter and we will look younger. That is true. Grief is time limited. This fact gives us the courage and willingness to face grief. If we don't resist the feeling of grief and totally surrender to it, it will run out in about 10 to 20 minutes. Then it will stop for variable lengths of time. If we keep surrendering to it every time it comes up, then it will eventually run out. We just allow ourselves to experience it fully. We only have to tolerate an overwhelming grief for 10 to 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, it will disappear. If we resist the grief, then it will go on and on. Suppressed grief can go on for years. That is so true. So what he's saying here is that if when we feel it, right? Because it's gonna come. It's gonna come, right? It's gonna come. As long as we're human and feeling, grief is going to come, the feeling of grief. But just like any other feeling, sadness, anger, frustration, all of those things, instead of running from it or acting like it's not there, like suppressing it and ignoring it or whatever the case, what he's saying is allow it. Just allow it. And you will come to know that after that amount of time, 10 to 20 minutes, after you just allow the feeling, then you will come into a realm of acceptance. Okay. All right. That hurt. I'm sad about it. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, what's done is done, and there's nothing that can be done about it. Right. So it's that realization of this is our new normal. This is my new normal. And yeah. And for that moment, you'll feel a freedom from that heaviness, and it's gonna come up. Like he stated here, it's gonna come up again for sure. But allow it again. And the more you accept it, right? The more you accept the process and allow the process to happen, then eventually, you'll know how to get to that resolve of acceptance sooner. I know this for myself. I promise you, okay? Here we go. In facing grief, we often have to acknowledge and let go of our shame and embarrassment about having the feeling in the first place. For men, this is especially so. We have to relinquish our fear of the feeling and our fear of being swamped and overwhelmed by it. It helps to realize that letting go of the resistance to the feeling moves us quickly through it. Letting go of the resistance to the feeling moves us quickly through it. Traditionally, women have said out of their own experience and wisdom, a good cry makes me feel better. That's true. It's very cleansing. Many a man has been surprised when he learned the truth of this. Experientially, there was the surprising and almost immediate relief from a pounding headache as soon as the grief about a past situation was allowed to come up. As the grief surfaced, there was the sentence, men don't cry. After letting go of the masculine pride about crying, then up came a fear that the crying would never stop once it was allowed to start. As soon as that fear was gone, then there was anger. It was anger at a society that forces men to suppress their feelings, and anger at the notion that men are not even supposed to have feelings. Exactly. That is so pseudo masculine. It's so stifling, right? With the letting go of that anger, the level of courage was reached, and then the needed cry could be allowed. Not only was there relief from the headache, but when the torment of sobs subsided, a profound peacefulness settled. Henceforth, the subject did not have to be avoided. Exactly. In fact, that's a lot of reason why some men aren't able to even find their base and their freedom right now. They can't soften, right? And they can't connect with the feminine side, which is there. It's there for all of us. We are the polarity of both masculine and feminine in all of us. And the feminine of us, if we align ourselves with it sometimes, that's what allows us to feel, to cry, to embrace, to hug, to love, to become vulnerable, and all of those things. And then the masculine side allows us to be assertive, speak up for ourselves, protection, and all of those things. So, but a lot of men, this with the pseudo masculinity, they don't allow themselves, they don't accept the fact that they have femininity in them as well. That's not saying that you are not a man. Man. Okay, here we go. Once a man has fully let the grief come up and totally freed himself from that suppressed energy, he is peaceful and his view of his own masculinity changes. He realizes that his masculinity is now more complete. Exactly. He is still just as much of a man, but now he is a man who can also be in touch with and handle his own feelings. Correct. Consequently, he is more adequate, more capable, more well rounded, more understanding, more mature, more capable of relating to and understanding others, more compassionate, and more loving. That's what it means to connect with that side of you, Sir, Mister. Okay? The psychological basis of all grief and mourning is attachment. That's what it is. Come on. Attachment and dependence occur because we feel incomplete within ourselves. Therefore, we seek objects, people, relationships, places, and concepts to fulfill inner needs. Because they are unconsciously utilized to fulfill an inner need, they come to be identified as mine. These are mine. That's my friend. That's my relationship. That's my. As more energy is poured into them, there is a transition from identifying with the external objects as mine to being an actual extension of me. Loss of the object or person is experienced as a loss of our own self and an important part of our emotional economy. Loss is experienced as a diminution of the quality of ourselves, which the object or person represented. The more emotional energy invested in the object or person, the greater will be the feeling of loss and the greater the pain associated with the undoing of the bonds of dependency. Attachment creates a dependency, and dependency, because of its nature, intrinsically carries with it a fear of loss. So true. Look at relationships where the couple has grown old together, seasoned, I like to say, and one of the spouses pass away, right? Within Usually within, if there's a strong attachment, and I'm gonna break this down in a second. If there's a strong attachment, or too strong of an attachment, then within 90 days, it is guaranteed that the other spouse will also pass away. Why? Because what this is called, medically speaking, this is called dying from a broken heart. Because they grew such an attachment to that partner that once that partner left, they didn't know how to be, because all of who they were tied into that partner, that person, all of who they were. Um, there is a such thing as being connected to someone, but not attached to someone. Because if we keep in mind that seasons come and seasons go, people come and people go. This is life. Nature shows us this every single day. And yet, for some reason, we feel that we're exempt or we're separate from nature. That is not the case. Planets transit and shift. We got a lot of them going on right now, right? The sun rises and sets daily. The moon rises and sets. It does not stay in one place, it shifts and moves, right? Flowers, once plucked, they die. Fruit, once plucked, it dies. Leaves, once fall hit, begin to die and they're released, only for new beginnings to happen. Death and rebirth is a cycle of life. So when it happens, right? This is my new understanding regarding death, right? When it happens, it's a shocker to us because of the heavy attachment that we have to the thing, the person, the place. Some people, when they lose their job, they have a fit. What am I gonna do? I don't have my title. Oh, what are people gonna think about me? And everything is attached to that thing instead of being connected to that season, that person, that place, that opportunity, that object, whatever. We become attached to it, and it becomes us a part of who we say we are, or a part of our existence in this earth, in this place, right? Instead of experiencing it when it's here, while it's here, connecting to it, embodying the now moments of it, we become one with it. And then we don't know what to do when that thing leaves. That's what it is. Attachment creates a dependency, and dependency, because of its nature, intrinsically carries with it a fear of loss. Within each person, there is the child, parent, and adult. When grief comes up, it is rewarding to ask within myself, is it the child, parent, or adult that is the source of this feeling? For example, the child within a person is scared that something would happen to a beloved dog. It wonders, how will I make it? The inner adult also feels grief, but the adult accepts the inevitable. The little kitty or doggy is not immortal. The adult in us regretfully accepts that impermanency is a reality of life. Exactly. We accept that our youth is not permanent, that many romantic relationships are not lifelong, and that our dog will one day die, right? That is life. That is life. And we have to remember that we are only here to experience this life, right? Not to become attached to it. Experience the experience. Don't become attached to it, because it has to shift, it has to go. We all have to, right? So one day somebody gonna have to get over the fact that you're not here anymore. And that's reality. It's not being morbid, that's truth, you know? All right, here we go. Next section, handling loss. Because of the nature of attachment, the first state preceding the actual experiencing of loss is that of fear of loss. This is usually defended in one or two ways. One is to increase the intensity of the attachment by ever persistent attempts to strengthen the bonds. This approach is based on the fantasy that the greater the bond, the less likely of loss. Ooh. However, this is the very maneuver that often precipitates loss in personal relationships, because the other person struggles to be free of the possessive attachment and the amount of restrictive control they feel being placed upon them. Thus, because what we hold in mind tends to manifest, the fear of a loss can paradoxically be the mechanism of bringing about that loss. It's just like in the scripture, Job said, the thing that I feared the most has come upon me. The very thing that I feared is actually what I willed to me, right? Whatever you give energy to is what will draw, what you will draw. That's just what it is. And so in this instance, he's describing someone like in a relationship that feels that they have to always buy stuff for somebody. They have to always take the initiative and do this and that or whatever the case, because they feel they have to overcompensate. I don't want this person to leave. I want them to stay. I don't want them to ever see me as, someone that they can live without. So let me just do and do and do and do and do. Never, ever, ever, ever feeling like they are enough. They're always doing and doing and doing in fear that that person that they're with will leave. Well, I'm here to tell you, my love, if that person is going to leave you, then you let them go. Okay. But a lot of people need to be needed. They need that thing, right? Instead of dealing with the real issue at hand, feelings of abandonment and rejection. All right. Next, here we go. The second way the fear of loss is handled is by the psychological mechanism of denial, which is in common language called playing ostrich. Putting your head in the sand. We see this around us every day in its various forms of refusing to face the inevitable. All the warning signs are there, but the person does not take heed, right? They're not reading the room. Thus, the man who is obviously in the process of losing his job tends not to notice. The partners in a marriage that is going down the drain take no corrective action. The person with a serious disease ignores all of the symptoms and avoids medical attention. The politicians fail to look at social problems, hoping they will go away. Mm-mm-mm. Man, whole countries are oblivious to the precarious state of existence, i.e., the 9/11 attack. We all know that there were warnings prior to the actual attack. I say this all the time. There's always whispers before a scream. Always. We just don't pay attention to them, or we try to ignore them or will them away. The motorist ignores the ominous warning signals of a misbehaving engine. Right? We have all experienced regret that we didn't pay attention to the warning signals of trouble ahead. To handle the fear of loss, we have to look at what purpose the external person or object serves in our life. What emotional need is being fulfilled? What emotions would arise were we to lose the objects or the person? Loss can be anticipated, and we can handle the various fears associated with the sense of loss by disassembling the emotional complexes that they represent and letting go of the individual component feelings. Let's say, for example, that you have a pet dog to which you have been attached for many years. It is obvious that old Rover is getting older. You find that you don't like to think about his advanced age, feeling uncomfortable at the prospect of his death and putting it out of mind. As you catch yourself doing this, you realize that these feelings are warning signals that you are not handling the emotional situation. And so you ask yourself, what purpose is a dog serving in my life? What is his emotional service to me? Love, companionship, devotion, amusement, and a diversion? Will losing the dog leave these personal emotional needs unfulfilled? In looking at this, some of the fear can be acknowledged and relinquished. Once the fear is let go, you don't have to resort to denial and pretend to yourself that Rover will live forever. Exactly. Another emotion associated with grief is mourning, and mourning is that of anger. The loss of that which is important frequently brings up a feeling of rage, which may be projected onto the world, society, individuals, and ultimately God, who is held to be responsible for the nature of the universe. Anger results from prior refusal to accept the fact that all relationships and possessions in this life are transitory. Even the physical body, which is our biggest attachment, come on, eventually has to be relinquished, as everyone is aware. Trust me, I know when my son left here, honey, I blamed everybody, okay, including myself. I blamed my diet. I, I, ooh, that thing was deep. I blamed everyone. I sure did until I was able to accept. Accept. Even my doctor had to tell me, this was not your fault. This was not your fault. And the moment he stated that was the first thing he said. He said, I want you to know this is not your fault. It was not your fault. Okay. It was something that was way beyond your understanding. There was nothing that you could have done. And even just hearing those words, I broke. I broke. It was something that was back in 2011. So he would have been 13 this year. Yeah, man, that was something. Okay. We feel that what has become important or confronting or comforting to us is a permanent attachment. Consequently, when that illusion is threatened, there is anger, resentment, and self pity, feelings which can result in chronic bitterness. Impotent rage is associated with the desire to change the nature of the world and the impossibility of doing so. In facing this fact of existence, a major loss can therefore bring about a shift in our philosophical position. One major loss can awaken us to the nature of all attachments and all relationships. It's true. Or we may again deny the obvious fact that all relationships are transitory and furiously re intensify existing bonds to compensate for the loss. A part of handling denial of the inevitability, okay, of loss is seeing through attempts of manipulation. In fantasy, the mind tries to develop tactics so as to avoid the loss. This may take the form of becoming gooder. That's funny, but that is so true. Becoming gooder or more hardworking, more honest, more persevering, or more loyal. In religious persons, this may take the form of trying to manipulate God by promises and bargains. Yeah, God, if you do this one more time, I promise I'm gonna go to church and I'm gonna forgive and I'm gonna love and I'm gonna treat my wife better. I'm gonna treat my husband better. I'm gonna treat my mama kind. I'm gonna talk to my neighbor. I'm gonna eat they cake that they made, that I don't like. I'm gonna eat it. All of these bargains and promises. In relationships, it may take the form of overcompensatory behavior. The spouse becomes ever more dutiful, loving, and attentive in an attempt to prevent a breakup. See? The inattentive husband suddenly starts bringing home gifts and flowers instead of getting to the root cause of the problem. Bandage work is what I call it, bandages. When the denial breaks down, the manipulation have not worked and the fear has been passed through. Then the depression itself, the actual process of mourning and grief takes place. All of these emotional stages can be worked through much more rapidly by the process of letting go, in which the inevitability of the emotion of grief is surrendered to and replaced by a willingness to let go of resistance and let the process pass through and complete itself. There can be a decision to let go of resisting the grief. Instead of denial and resistance, you plunge into it and get over it. You have a good cry over old rover or the lost relationship. Associated with the feeling of grief is always a variable amount of guilt. This is based on the fantasy that the loss represents a punishment or that a different attitude or behavior would have prevented it from happening. Absolutely, I felt that one too. Unless it is relinquished, the guilt can then recycle and refuel the anger and rage. The unacknowledged and unrelinquished rage may be projected onto others in the environment in the form of blame. Blame projected onto other relationships may then compound the loss by bringing about further loss, right? Because you keep blaming other people, they don't go away. They're going to run because no one wants to feel that, especially when they had nothing to do with it, but it's easy to point outward than to look inward and see what's happening and to mitigate the problem. This happens frequently between marital partners as a result of the death of a child. Come on here. I didn't even give him permission to put my business out here, but here we go. Okay, because I was married at the time. And man, oh man. He passed in 2011. We separated in 2015 and eventually divorced in 2018. Absolutely. Listen, we didn't know how to get through that. It has been reported that the divorce rate among parents who have lost children is as high as 90%. Because of the projection of blame, a severe loss is then compounded by another severe loss, that of a marital partner. An example of this type of reaction is the case of a 40-year-old woman. She had an excellent marriage for 20 years with an attentive, dutiful husband. Her youngest son developed leukemia. When he died, she went into grief and mourning, and more importantly, developed a rage reaction. It took the form of hatred. She hated the doctors. She hated the hospital. She hated God. She hated her husband and the existing children. Her rage became so uncontrollable that she became physically violent and threatening. Several times the police had to be called to control her violent behavior. Finally, the other children left home out of fear of the chaos, physical abuse, and menacing emotional states. Her husband left no stone unturned in trying to help her with the rage, but she vented her fury upon him as well, violently attacking him on several occasions. Finally, in desperation and despair, he was driven from the home. The chaotic situation ultimately ended in a divorce in which the woman lost her home. It was almost 5 years before the rage subsided, at which time the woman had destroyed her whole life and now had to start over from scratch, rebuilding a new life. Mm. Now, it didn't get to that point, but yeah, it got pretty bad. When all of the negative emotions have been worked through, surrendered to, and let go of, relief finally occurs, and the former suffering is replaced by acceptance. Acceptance is different from resignation. In resignation, there are still residuals of the previous emotion left. There is a reluctance and a delaying of the true recognition of the facts. Resignation says, I don't like it, but I have to put up with it. With acceptance, resistance to the true nature of the facts has been relinquished. Thus, one of the signs of acceptance is serenity. With acceptance, the struggle is over and life begins anew. The energies that were bound up in the previous negative emotion are now freed up, so that the healthier aspects of the personality are now re energized. The creative aspects of the mind develop opportunities for new life situations and further options for growth and experience, accompanied by a new sense of aliveness. A well known and widely practiced teaching is the Serenity Prayer of the 12-step program. It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Failure to work through any of the various emotions associated with mourning and loss can result in chronic stuckness in any of its components. Thus, it can result in prolonged depression and prolonged states of denial in which the death of a person is actually denied. Chronic guilt or refusal to work through the emotions associated with loss can result in delayed grief reaction and physical disease. The mechanisms behind this process are explained in a later chapter on the relationship between mind and body. The suppressed energy of the unrelinquished emotions reemerges through the body's endocrine and nervous system as an energetic imbalance, which impairs the flow of life energy through the body's acupuncture meridians. This results in pathologic changes in various organs. It is a well known fact that the death rate among the bereaved is much higher than that of the general population, especially in the first year or two following the death of a spouse. I told you. One source of grief related guilt is anger at the loved one for departing. That's it. This is often suppressed because it seems irrational to the conscious mind. The virtues of the departed loved one are enhanced and exaggerated in fantasy, and this discrepancy compounds the guilt. How could we be angry at such a wonderful person? There is guilt about being angry at God, the author of the universe, for having allowed the tragic event to take place. A 60-year-old woman came into the office with multiple physical complaints. She had asthma attacks, allergies, bronchitis, frequent episodes of pneumonia, and all kinds of breathing difficulties. During psychotherapy, it was revealed that her mother had died 22 years previously, and she stated that curiously, she had had no reaction to her mother's death. Oddly, although it was her responsibility, she had not ordered a headstone to be placed on her mother's grave. Wow. Wow. From information given, it was obvious that she had had an extremely dependent relationship with her mother, about whom she was ambivalent because of the mother's refusal to fill all of her dependency needs. It took many months for her to work through her massive denial, which was associated with guilt over her anger at her mother for leaving her. That anger was directed inwardly at herself in the form of disease, which also expressed her helplessness and her wish to cry out for her mother. The suppressed desire to cry for the mother lost, led to a constant feeling that she could not breathe. She hated herself for the love hate feelings for her mother, and the sum total of all her repressed emotions had reemerged in the form of her multiple respiratory symptoms and complaints, psychosomatic illnesses. As she worked through the delayed mourning, the reaction to the grief and loss began to surface. The extent of her resistance to working through these emotions and how that resistance had resulted in her physical symptoms became very clear to her. Especially, eventually, she went for additional professional training to become a therapist working with the dying in a hospice program. Look at that. That is beautiful, man. Next section, preventing grief. Preventing grief. All right. From the nature of the processes we've described, it becomes apparent that severe mourning, loss, and the pathological reactions that may ensure can be prevented by early recognition and by preemptive surrender of the associated feelings, while they are still mild and can be handled without excessive suffering. As we have seen, the basis of all mourning and loss is attachment, plus the denial of the transitory nature of all relationships. We can begin by looking at our lives, identifying those areas of attachment, and asking ourselves, what internal needs are they satisfying? What feeling would come up if I were to lose them? How can my inner emotional life be balanced so as to decrease the extent degree, the number of attachments on external objects and people? The greater our attachment to that which is outside of ourselves, the greater is our overall level of fear and vulnerability to loss. We can ask ourselves why we feel so incomplete. Why am I so empty within myself that I have to search for solutions in the form of attachments and dependency on others? We can begin to look at our own inner areas of immaturity. Specifically, we need to examine, where am I looking to get love rather than to give it? The more loving we are, the less vulnerable we are to grief and loss, and the less we need to seek attachments. When we have acknowledged and let go of all negative feelings, and we have graduated from smallness to the recognition of our greatness so that our internal joys comes from the pleasure of giving and loving, then we are really invulnerable to loss. When the source of happiness is found within, we are immune to the losses of the world. When we take a critical look at our life, we see all of the attachments and escapes into which we have fallen. Each one represents a potential future source of pain and suffering. The really important areas should be closely examined. Let's take, for example, the failure to face these issues in the commonly seen so-called retirement syndrome. Traditionally, this may occur in women when the job of raising young children comes to an end with their maturity and leaving home, the empty nest syndrome. And with a man when he reaches a retirement age or loses his job, or through some physical disablement, is unable to carry on his previous work. The reaction that typically occurs in middle age is due to the many years of pre-existing denial. There's often a lack of facing the inevitable and making plans for other life activities that would gratify the same inner needs, which in these cases are feelings of self esteem, importance, the wanting to feel needed and significant, and the need to make a contribution and be productive. Mm-mm-mm. Anticipation of the inevitable and preparing for it now bring relatively minor discomfort compared to the traumatic grief and loss at a later date. We can look at our major love relationships and honestly examine them. To what degree do they subserve our selfish inner needs? To what degree are we really using the other person to exploit them for our own gain? To what degree are they merely subserving our happiness? To find out, all we need to do is ask ourselves, if their happiness were best served by leaving me, how would I feel about that? This reveals the degree to which we are trying to restrict and control the other person, which is attachment and not love. Over 2,000 years ago, the Buddha made the observation that the basis of all human suffering is due to desire and attachment. And human history has merely proven the truth of his teaching. What is the solution to that dilemma? As we can see, it is only the small aspect of oneself that becomes attached. The smaller self buys into the frightened, inadequate set of programs that we have unwittingly allowed to run us. The purpose of letting go is to de energize these programs so that they no longer run us. Then we are free to expand into the greater awareness of our higher self. That part of us to which we refer to as our greater self loves rather than seeks love. Consequently, there comes the awareness that we are at all times surrounded by love, which is unlimited. Love is automatically attracted to the person who is loving. Love is automatically attracted to the person who is loving. By constantly letting go of our negative feelings, we thus cure present pain and prophylactically prevent the occurrence of future pain. Fear is replaced by trust, and with it comes a profound sense of well being. Immunity to grief of loss occurs when we replace the dependency on the small self, which is the personality, with dependence on the higher self, the divinity within. We look for security to the higher self, which is eternal, instead of the small self, which is transitory. That is so true. That is so good. And this, I had to learn. I really had to learn. I had to develop. Man, I had to get into that understanding for myself, because when I tell you that grief is something different, that grief is different, and the attachment to things is, ooh, we don't realize how attached we are until that thing is no longer in our control, in our possession, in our sight. Um, we don't realize how dependent we are on it until it has to go. And then it's like, oh my goodness, like he asked in here, what emptiness is that thing, that person, that place fulfilling? What emptiness is it fulfilling? What am I utilizing that thing outside of me for? Outside of just it simply just being, and me just enjoying the beingness of what it is at that time. What am I feeling? What am I filling the void of? Instead of focusing and healing and confronting the void, mitigating the issue. That's good, you all. This is good. And that was the end of that chapter, chapter 5, the chapter of grief. On Sunday, we will be going on to chapter 6, which is fear. Mm, you all, this is necessary, man. This is necessary. I hope you got something out of it. I really do. I hope you did. I definitely did. I'm glad though to also be on the right path in terms of life, death, cycles of life, because these are things that are inevitable. These are things that we cannot control. We cannot control it at all in the least bit. So instead of fighting against it, instead of denying that it exists, just allow, simply allow. But in the allowing, stay in the now, connect, not attach. Be connected to the now. Be connected to the moment, the feelings, and the embodiment of. Be connected to what the now brings, what the now person brings, what the now opportunity brings. Get everything out of the now, out of the moments of now that you can, because when the time, not if the time comes for you to have to release it, or them to release you, or whatever the case, when that time comes, you will be okay and able to release in peace, in joy. Why? Because you embraced every now moment. And you have those moments to refer back to, because once you experience it, it now goes into the database of your memory, never to be removed. It's permanently there. So when you want to feel the feelings of those moments again, just go to your memory bank, because they will forever be there for you to refer to at all times. That's the beauty of now. That's the beauty of connecting to now. Not being attached to it because we know that it has to go, but being connected to it, right? Being connected to it. Ooh, that's good. That is a revelation, man. It's so freeing too. Okay. So, like I said, Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be reading chapter 6, the chapter of fear. All right. Now, we're still early on in this book reading now. You all have to understand, I'm offering this book to you. It's a PDF ebook version. It's all yours for free. Okay. Nobody has to pay. I've removed that. I used to charge $5 for the books and things like that. And I mean, whatever. You can get the book, but at the end of the day, know that it does cost for me to do what I do. Okay. So seeds are not required, but they are welcome. I do appreciate you for that. Okay. But if you need the reading material, reach out to me. Okay. Send me an email with your email address, and I will be able to get that over to you immediately. Okay. Email me at info@biancamissblee.com. All right, with your information, and I'll send it right on over to you. It will be sent directly from me to you. Okay. All righty. Also visit my website if you want to reach out to me and inquire about any services that I offer, or you want to have a conversation, a consultation, whatever you want to do. Then you can reach me at the website. On Clubhouse is above my head. You can just tap there and it'll send you straight there. Everywhere else, it's on the screen or in my bio in the captions, and you'll be able to access that information there. All right. You all also, lastly, follow me on social media: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever. You can see me at Dr. Bianca Miss B. Lee. Okay. All righty, you all. That is it for today. Again, you all know I don't like to keep you. I don't like to keep you, especially on Tuesday nights, because it's already late. And you all got to get back to your evenings, your children, your spouses, yourself, your shows, your wine, your dinner. Okay. And I'm going to release you and see you back here on Sunday. I love you. I mean it. There is absolutely, positively nothing, and I mean nothing, that you can do about it. So don't you even try it, because it's not going to work. All right. We will talk to you then. You'll have an amazing evening and a great rest of the week. Peace.